Hi, welcome to my talk about how can we call it integration success beyond using some kind of specifications. So in this case, async API. So we are always lost in translation when we would like to start with dealing with integration capabilities. So my name is Daniel Kocot. I'm working for Codecentric in Germany, and I'm a principal consultant focusing on APIs in that case. And I believe in APIs as digital products. So if you want to connect with me, you find me on LinkedIn. So I'm normally some kind of API evangelist. I'm also doing ambassadorship for the Async API. I'm also a member of the TSC. Sometimes I appropriate my work as a team topologist advocate, and when I'm not working, I'm a friend of bricks with the kids, actually, and that's a good case. So let's get into the stuff. So when we normally think about events, that's why we want to use Async API, we have some kind of perfect setup in mind, and literally it always fails. So it's like we have async API written or generated. We have a CI/CD pipeline running. We hopefully have the event broker somehow configured and running. And at the meantime, we just want to create some kind of message type. So in this case, customer created. Actually, total simple stuff. We have an event that throws data in when a customer is created. But when we look on the business side there, it's getting complicated then, because when we look at sales, it's like, oh, a new prospect. We go into compliance. Oh, registered legal entity. And IT just has in mind, oh, a new CRM record is inserted. Oh, okay, that's technical stuff. But it's not really clear what the event was meant for. So we really have to get in conversation. So we really have to think about what is the real meaning of all of this there. Now, Async API and the event-based promise comes in and maybe comes for the rescue. Not really, because the events promise some kind of freedom. Async API makes it then real, but it depends on contracts and automation speed up delivery. And we use event-driven patterns to bring scalability and decoupling into the play. So it's somehow still technical, but syntax is not semantics. So we really don't get a glimpse what is really being needed by the different domain types we have, or domains actually, in an organization or in a company, wherever we actually are. So it's not to say to the field to say, okay, let's do domain-driven design. No, it's really about understanding what's the meaning of words inside different domains. And this is actually where the real trouble starts. So when we go now on the event-based side again, so we look at events again, it's really about, oh, we have this event order shipped. And you say it, as we saw it earlier on the first slide, it's really, when you go into logistics with this, it's like truck has left the warehouse. Fine. In finance, maybe an invoice will be issued. A customer service would react on customer received the order. So it's really, really complicated from the technical side to really deliver the real needed payload. Because when a truck has left the warehouse, might be a totally different payload than when an invoice is issued, and so on and so on and so on. So you have very be clear about what actually is the payload of the event for the different worlds. So you really have to think about what is actually meant by this. And this is where the data interface quadrants comes into play. Data interface quadrants is some kind of framework we developed at Codecentric because we always struggled with integration projects, interfaces in this context to really see, okay, what is actually needed on the other side? Is it just the pure data? Is it something more compromised? Or is it maybe a real data product? And this is where these things come in. So we have these quadrants here. A total simple thing. On the left side, it's more related to raw data, very internal, so it's just a data link. Then we have the classical backend for front-end stuff on the lower right side, where it's actually more related to, okay, I need a UI and I want to bring something from the backend to the front end actually. And overall, these two types of interfaces, we have different others that are more related to external usability and even more the aggregated style of it. So the platform data product is more related to what we look at now for data product sites, really good maintained, good described, and so on and so on. And with the composition service, it's more about, okay, somebody had a specific need to get, in this case, a specific event delivered. So this really helps us to cover the needs actually of all stakeholders into it. And it really makes sense to combine all these things then together. But this is not the only helper in the play. So actually, we are dealing with large enterprise scales. So it makes sense to have a look on of the level of an enterprise architect actually into this. So, and maybe when you're doing enterprise architecture, you mainly have some kind of enterprise principles around that. And this can guide you somehow as a compass. What you normally find in organizations is TOGAF as a framework to be used by the enterprise architects. And this is the ADM. So somehow the development method of the whole architecture. We have different stages. We start really on the preliminary side where it's really on to the basic stuff. So getting into the vision, then dealing with business architecture, dealing with information systems architecture, moving into technology architecture there. Always in mind the requirements, because they're in the middle there. So it's really about to really think what is actually needed by the stakeholders. What are the requirements of the different stakeholders actually involved there? So it's really going to the circle. The good thing about TOGAF, and also something that's often misunderstood, is I can just leave some phases out and just go in the phases that are really needful for that kind of thing or matters, what I really want to achieve there. So, and when we put this, what we had at the beginning to really create a good prepared event, it's more that we can just reflect on different stages there. So at first, at the preliminary stage, we really have to think about vocabulary in the domains or in a specific domain. This is what we deal most of the time with customers, creating glossaries. Really mean writing down the word and the meaning of the word. It's total simple, but it's really needed because there's totally a misunderstanding. So you can go into your organization and ask the people, what is a platform? If it's not defined within the organization or within the domain, a lot of people will reclaim different meanings out of it. So this is what it's all meant about. Having the vocabulary establish a shared meaning. So we have the vision. With this, we go on to the capabilities, looking into requirements again and really define, what is really needed? What are the capabilities somebody from the business side wants to really achieve or needs as a capability for the customers or whoever is in need of this. In the next step, looking at the data, there's this semantic alignment. So really looking forward to putting the things in the place where it's really needed. And then we go in the opportunities phase and think about what is actually the right standard to use. Is this what somebody need really an event, or is it maybe something different? Do we really need AsyncAPI to describe this? Or is it just description of the payload? So maybe we can just use cloud events for this. And Then we can go somehow to guardrails for the whole language there. So really make clear that it's fully under test. So really maintain, obtain some kind of observability, but more in direction of a governance model, so that we really govern the language we are actually using in the field. And this all brings us to the point that we are now able to establish something. So we can now move into this maze of standards actually available. So which means to really see, okay, what is really needed, because adoption is harder than the agreement behind all of this. So when we look there, it's really about, we have different types of standards. It's JSON schema, AsyncAPI. We really have to define, okay, what we use on the TOGAF side, on the DIQ side, and so on and so on. And it's quite easy to choose a standard, but it's really hard in the end to really apply it consistently. So it's easy to say, we do everything in JSON. But if somebody steps out the line and says, okay, I don't get with this JSON descriptions, I want to use XML, you have to find a way to bring in consistency. And to be honest, adoption does not mean alignment. So we are very strict to it. We really have to adopt the things. And maybe we adopt TOGAF to a specific kind of thing. Maybe we adopt AsyncAPI to a specific state, but we do not go the whole way with it. And maybe we find cloud events because we're just focusing on somehow the semantics of the payload more efficient, or bring it into a combination with AsyncAPI to describe also the architecture behind all the things. So it's really a mixture of things in the end, because there's a need of adoption, nothing more. And this is actually, again, a real challenge, not just picking the standard, but making the standard stick again. So really fit it to the needs, not to say, okay, this is the standard, we push it all in and it will fit to our needs. No, look at the standards, take what you really need, take the methodologies you need, and then move into the right direction. So there are a lot of things outside, so we don't have to reinvent the wheel. We can use a lot of things that are already there, even canvases, to make it more obvious for business people to understand what is actually really needed. So now some practical tactics, because we been through all of this, had a look at the stuff, and are really looking into the whole thing there. So everything what we do now is actually quite easy. We want to come from misunderstood events to a shared understanding. So maybe a lot of you heard about event storming. I just write that down, storm the events together. So we have to map the business and tech perspective in the same room. We can use for that the method of event storming. But again, adoption is the thing. So just use what you really need, not reflect 100% to the event storming method. Yeah, it would be good to have it in your toolbox actually there, but don't stick to it. Use what you really need. Then, if you've done the event storming or you brought the perspectives together, it's time to really name the things and create this living glossary. So you don't create anything that's just static and not movable, actually not really living. You create a living glossary to really make it clear to everyone who's looking at it, and is able to also bring in his or her perspective into the place. So this glossary is not really stick to a group or whatever. It's really open. It has to live from the organization, from the minds of the organization there. So, and then we have to place in semantic checks into the pipeline, because normally we just check the schema. That's good. When you check the schema, that's actually good. You know that everything will work fine. But on the other hand, that doesn't bring the meaning into the right place. So you really have to test the meaning actually. So these semantic checks are there to really say, okay, these are the words we are using. These are the standards of abbreviations or whatever we are using. So it's quite good to really test this meaning, to really check, are the keys the right keys to be used? And then choose your battle. So really go into the play with DIQs. Really bring up these 4 quadrants and say, okay, what is exactly does the consumer on the other side wants to have or really needs to get the capability delivered there? So we are actually non-technical here. It's really about looking at data, really bringing it to the point, and then use technology to deliver it. So it's really up to this to really make sure that we all know what is actually happening there. So this was actually the whole talk about this some kind of lost in translation thing. So the important step is really to say, okay, events don't integrate systems. Shared meaning does. So really have to understand what is meant by the naming convention of the events. I have to understand the payload of the events. And AsyncAPI helps me to define the syntax, but the meaning must be really shared. So it's not enough to say, look, in this AsyncAPI file, you have to additionally share also the meaning. For doing this, you can use these enterprise principles like TOGAF I presented to you, and also use DIQs to guide you actually through the language alignment so that it really matters in the end. I have a little challenge for you. When you publish your next event, ask yourself, will every consumer interpret this the same way? Thank you. Thank you for listening, and goodbye.